This Weekly Five, I want to talk about the school finance system and especially the ruling that came down from the Texas Supreme Court a couple of weeks ago. And this ruling stated that our school finance system was constitutional. Uh, this was a surprise to many of the superintendents in Texas who thought that it would likely come down as unconstitutional, as it has many times before, because of a number of reasons, including the lack of money in the system. But although imperfect, they said everything was met constitutional muster. And this also has been supported by many politicians in Austin, including our Commissioner of Education. But what I also want to talk about here is what actually makes a constitutional school finance system. Well, first of all, when you look at the Constitution, the direction it gives is that we need to have a method of imparting a general diffusion of knowledge to the students in the state in an efficient way. And so, our previous cases, we have learned that there are things that haven't been constitutional. One is that there are significant discrepancies from district to district, which simply means that a district who has a lot of money and can use all that money for the kids, and you have a poor district over here that has very little, you basically create a system in which, whether you mean it or not, you say that the students in the rich district have more value than one in the poor, and that becomes an inefficient model of school finance. Is there enough money to meet the goals of the legislature? And if you don't have that in place, then that lacks an efficiency that has often been found to be unconstitutional. And then a lot of times is that the state, through their cutting money and that type of thing, force schools to tax at the very maximum amount, which they have stated has created a de facto state property tax, which is unconstitutional as well. But does money matter? Well, many of our politicians look at charts like the one you have right here. And in this chart, you see that since 1970 is that there's been an increase in the amount of money spent per student. And you look across, at least in the NAEP reading scores, is that has been relatively flat during that period. But I'll tell you, I've done studies in more developing countries, and you can see here is that Zone 1 is the area that has the most money, the most resources for the kids, and they score overall at a much higher level. The trend always moves in favor of the school that has the most money in those situations. So you have a little bit of a situation here where you definitely need a minimum amount to be able to try to reach whatever goals you have in place. But I think that overall is that we just put the money in the wrong place. Is that a lot of times our schools have become more expensive because of all of the requirements the state puts in there and the federal government puts in there. Is that we have testing after testing and accountability measure after accountability measure. And I tell you, no superintendent has any problems with having accountability measures with the school, but we need to be reasonable and rational with what we do. And therefore, what we're doing all the time is chasing all these measures and all this documentation and all this bureaucracy for the state. And in order to be able to accomplish that, we have to increase the number of personnel that we have in order to just simply meet all of the forms and all of the requirements that the state has. And many of these do not impact student performance one bit. So we need to think about not only having more money into the system, but also where that money goes. So, looking at Scott McCowan, I heard him speak one time, and he talked about what actually needed to be in a good school finance system. And he stated that it supplies enough money to meet our state educational goals, however the legislature defines them. And we have very clear goals. We have accountability measures. They may be out of control, but they tell us what we need to do right there and what where our students need to be considered successful within our accountability system. We also need to have additional money to keep up with enrollment growth and cost inflation. We need to have student equity, meaning that a student in one district is not considered more valuable based upon the money they have than a student in a different district. And we also need to have taxpayer equity, whereas because you're property wealthy, your taxes shouldn't be able to be so much lower than someone in a poor district. There needs to be equity across the board. Also want to, as I go through, last week I kind of touched on a little bit of a touchy topic, had a lot of feedback on this stuff, not mentioning any names, not anything down the line, a lot of people on the negative end, but a few on the positive. And so that was really my point when we came through here, is we need to be careful when we talk about students, is that we have a whole slew of different types of students. We have different strengths, weaknesses. We have students that that are just different sometimes, and we need to be an advocate for everybody. And the point that I was trying to make in that situation. UT Tyler, we appreciate you guys, and if there's anything we can do for you, let me know.